Hey everybody, how you doing? Okay, let's jump right in. Last week, our friend Jules came in, gave us an incredible education on relationship management, networking, reputation, and the like. I hope you enjoyed that. She's one of my favorite people to bring in. I think she's wickedly smart, and that's not just some Boston pun. I really do think that. We're going to build on that today because I've been teasing you all semester long that you're going to end up hearing these 6 factors for entrepreneur success. I previewed number 5 a while ago, but finally today, you're going to get the rest of them. You're going to hear the real deal, and you're going to hear it from somebody who is also wickedly capable of providing such an education. When I was talking to him, I was like, how many startups have you run or managed for? He lost count. He doesn't remember. It's in the information. You can go on LinkedIn and see if you want. In addition to running those companies, building his own companies, which he did partially while he was a student here at U of M, and then again, after he had graduated, he also then became the turnaround expert that when VCs came in to put money and to revamp and to revitalize an existing startup, they needed to have a seasoned vet to come in and help run those operations. He was that guy. Then maybe 2-ish years ago, someone twisted his arm enough to convince him to come over to the university and to work with us, and he's now CFE's executive director. Couple points I want to make to you while we're going through the presentation today. Something new I want to try, that little QR code in the bottom. If you have a question throughout any part of this, submit it there, and that way at the end I can make sure I try to pick those up in the conversation so we touch on what you want to hear. And other than that, we'll have a couple polls, but please help me welcome our guest, Kurt Skifstad.
All right. Clicker. Thanks, Eric. Good morning. Morning. Good morning. Come on. Oops, okay. So, as Eric said, I'm Kurt. I'm the executive director at CFE now. I'd like to share today some thoughts on what it means to be an entrepreneur. You've seen examples from some very talented and accomplished individuals this semester, and what I'd like to do today is kind of give you a longitudinal view on what it means to be an entrepreneur from a career perspective. So not a single startup, but what the trajectory might look like and why that might be an interesting choice for you going forward. A couple of quick slides about me so you understand kind of the perspective from which I'm bringing this. And then we'll do some definitions and talk about what it means to be an entrepreneur, and then earning your tuition money back with the 6 guaranteed steps to entrepreneurial success. So, and then as Eric said, there's gonna be some interactive stuff at the end, which will be fun. So let's jump in. In my background, I came here as an undergrad a very long time ago, with always the intent to go out and travel onward to probably California, which is where all the fun stuff was happening in my world. Technically, ended up meeting a gentleman by the name of Ramesh Jain, who asked me to stay and get a PhD and sponsored my research, and then ended up starting my first company right out of school with Ramesh, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But that journey has turned into 8 startups, 5 times as a founder, a couple times being brought in to the early management team, raised a bunch of venture money. My world has been venture capital, which is one way to think about entrepreneurship and to build companies, but certainly not the only way. But again, for perspective, that's where I've been. As Eric mentioned, later in my career, kind of went from being the founder and the guy raising money and growing the company to the guy that came in with the next round of money that the investors brought in to complement the founding team. And then most of the past decade has been spent doing turnarounds in venture portfolios, so distressed assets where the investors thought there was something still there, and that would involve restructuring teams and a lot of go-to-market, which we'll talk about some of the lessons learned from there. And then now, in addition to having this wonderful opportunity here to speak with you and work with students and all the great things we do at the center, I'm an entrepreneur advisor to several venture funds and a couple of early stage startup companies. This morning I spent an hour on the phone with a CEO who I'm mentoring has a fantastic little company, 40 employees. They just cleared $1 million in revenue last year and are on a big growth curve, and it's fun to be able to help the next generation of leaders move forward. Moving along, just kind of, again, more context where I'm coming from. The companies that I worked with, that I founded, that I grew, were all venture-backed software companies. In the background, you see the Mazda Miata or the MX-5, depending on your perspective. That's my first company. Took some technology out of the AI lab in the late 80s and turned that into a solution that we brought to the automotive industry at a global scale and ended up being used in pretty much every design studio in the world and the supplier bases. And it's just an amazing part of the journey. Again, this is a company we founded in 1990. We sold in the mid-90s, for about $35 million, which back then was a lot of money, and still kind of has a long tail to it. The product ended up existing for about 25 years until it finally got absorbed into as a standalone within a much larger suite of solutions. Just last week, I ran into somebody who used our solution in the automotive industry. And I hadn't heard that the product name was Surfacer. I hadn't heard that word in a very long time. And then other things we've done, or I've done, inspection, robotic simulation, multimedia management. Some of the early VR work in the 90s, we actually sold a large-scale VR solution to Ford Motor Company for in-cockpit studies of human interaction. So you could put the headset on and be 3% female or a 98% male and try to reach for controls and see, can you still see the mirrors and stuff like that. Really, really fun stuff. Did a search company in the early 2000s, which every software person had to do back then. And then got into a number of big data related things. Most recently, one of the turnarounds I did was in the healthcare space where we were ingesting 1 in 5 Medicare admissions to hospitals in the US and doing analytics to try to figure out what was driving differential outcomes. So using software to improve patients' lives, which was pretty fun. So that's me for context. And then I'd like to kind of move on to what it means to be an entrepreneur. So you're in Entrepreneurship 407, that's what we are? Yeah. The numbers always confuse me. You've heard from a bunch of entrepreneurs, but can we even define what an entrepreneur is? I was on a call with a surprising number of department heads last week at this university, and it was said that entrepreneurship is too complex a topic to have a single definition. I believe it's worth doing the hard work to figure out what it is, because if you can't say what it is, then you can't measure what you're trying to accomplish. So this is the audience participation part. Who can give me a definition of entrepreneurship? Yes, sir. Somebody who eats by their own hand. I love that. Mine was I sing for my supper. Yeah, right? Anybody? Another? I mean, this is, I want to come back to this because this is part of why this is so much fun to do. I'm going to pick on you there in the checkered jacket there, white t-shirt. Nope, it's you. Yeah. Define entrepreneurship.
I would think of entrepreneurship as like somebody making a career out of investing in businesses and growing some effort out of like the grassroots kind of.
Growing an effort out of grassroots, investing, building. Anybody else? Let's go way up in the top there. You in the giant sweatshirt. Pardon me? Somebody who creates something. Solves a problem. Good stuff. So we'll come back to this. But so the definition I use, the definition we iterated to in the center is the pursuit of opportunity beyond resources currently controlled. And so this is what I would call a big tent definition. A lot of operational definitions, a lot of practical definitions involve building companies, getting them funded, moving for profit, et cetera. But just for context, I like to think of this as more generally as somebody who solves a meaningful problem, or the process of solving a new problem and getting the resources and motivating the people and things you need to be able to deliver value to a specific market segment. So if this is broadly the definition of entrepreneurship, and entrepreneur, excuse me, coffee's taking effect, I'm speaking too quickly, is somebody who gets shit done, right? It's somebody who decides to take responsibility to take their idea or concept or opportunity they've seen and actually realize it in the world and create value for themselves and other stakeholders. Notably, this doesn't mention profitability, and it doesn't say startup companies, doesn't say venture capital, because I think the skills of being an entrepreneur can be applied across the spectrum of commercial endeavor, nonprofit endeavor, in your personal lives. It really comes down to a growth mindset of engaging the world from a perspective of how can I make it better, and then what can I do to actually make that change happen. Okay, so this is my context for why this is interesting, and then our branding within the Center for Entrepreneurship. What we want to see is that you guys go out in the world and engage with this mindset to solve really interesting problems, see opportunity to create value, to use all the tools that you get at this wonderful university and embrace those to bring together resources and make the world a better place. And so, again, this doesn't speak to, what I did all my life was, for profit, for return for investors. But this mindset is going to be useful to you independent of your path. And yes, of course, I want you to go out and start companies and build nonprofits, and I want to help you with that, and we want to help you longitudinally. It's been wonderful engaging with Eric and going out and seeing our alumni and all the wonderful things they do, and in some small way helping them connect the dots after the fact as well. So why would you want to be an entrepreneur? I'm not going to dive into the Simon Sinek book here. I recommend you take a look. He's a very compelling speaker and author who talks about why we make products and who cares, and again, this mindset of problem solving from a value creation perspective. But why would you want to consider this path? The entrepreneur from Central Casting, we start a company to take it public and make a ton of money, right? This is the social network view of the world with Jesse Eisenberg playing Mark Zuckerberg. You build something and you make it really big and create a lot of value and success, right? I mean, the reality is that's not the outcome for the vast majority of entrepreneurs. It isn't this direct trajectory from idea to exit. Anybody play Portal? Portal's probably older than you guys, so you can chuckle at the joke, right? The cake is a lie. The reward at the end isn't why you're doing what you're doing. And this is a really important thing I want you to understand coming out of this. It's not, and there's a lot of kumbaya stuff coming out of this, but the reality is most times you start a company, it's going to fail, sometimes spectacularly, sometimes less so. I've created, as they say, I've created craters that are visible from outer space, right? So much money lost by investors that it's that big, and that's just part of the game. I've started or been involved with 8 companies, 6 companies, whatever it is, and probably a 4,400 batting average, which is part of the game. You fail and you succeed, and you move on. But the reality is the likelihood is you're not going to be successful. So then, why do you take this chance to raise your hand and say, I'm going to own the creation of value. I'm going to take my idea and give it life out in the world so that people can benefit from this idea. And the reality is the path is hard and convoluted. My argument again is the value is the path itself. We talked a couple semesters ago. We had a founder in here who pitched 400 times before she raised her first round of money. That journey became a foundational part of her story. Company ended up raising hundreds of millions of dollars, and is impacting individuals in the healthcare space profoundly with their solution. But it wasn't I've got an idea, I'm going to get it funded, and it's going to go to the moon. It's a complex process, and sometimes you do end up with cake at the end, and that's awesome, and that's fun, and the cake tastes pretty good. But you look at what comes out of, again, this journey of taking your idea, finding customers, finding a team, finding the resources required to deliver it to the real world is a fascinating thing. Part of the challenge is what you think it's going to be is almost never what it turns out to be. Right? So I talked about my first company was based on technology we had developed here at the AI lab that related to a new brand of sensing technology that had just been developed. And we thought that was going to transform the way car bodies were designed, for example. It turned out the mathematical modeling we used to interpret that data was actually what was interesting to customers. And we ended up building essentially a CAD system for freeform surface modeling that did some really interesting things, and we sold very successfully, but it had very little or actually nothing to do with the sensing technology that we thought was going to drive this change in the market. Steve Blank, who is probably one of the founders of modern entrepreneurial thought, our program here at the center had the benefit of his wisdom very early on. Remember meeting him. I was a CEO out in the ecosystem here, but Doug Neal, who was this role back then, invited me in to come and participate in the conversations with Steve. Really benefited our program of this, and this whole idea of engaging the market with an open mindset and understanding that you need to learn what the market needs, not what you think is what's going to drive success. Interestingly, this phrase, there's a related phrase that is attributed to a lot of people. Winston Churchill, Dwight Eisenhower's, the planning is everything, the plan means nothing. And my favorite variation of this is everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face, which was Mike Tyson. And I've certainly been punched in the face by markets more than once. The question is, what are you going to do about it, right? So we have a bunch of companies here, brands you're very familiar with. Which one of these started out in the paper market? Wow. How many? Okay. So the answer is, does it tell the answer when I click it, or is this?
It should when you click it.
Okay, so this is real time. What do I got to do?
I don't know. It didn't.
The answer is Nokia. Nokia started out in the paper market. I had Nokia phones for years. Next one, let's look at who started out in the online gaming market before pivoting. So the top one is Slack, by the way, if you recognize the logo. Slack, YouTube, Amazon.
Damn, that is an overwhelming response for Slack.
Overwhelming response, and that is actually correct. Well done.
Kudos.
Next one, what about providing cleaning solutions? All right, so Play-Doh was in fact a material designed to remove schmutz from walls, and then the children of the owners started playing with it, and they added colors to it and did it. But you look at all these companies, some pivoted significantly, some were more modest pivots, we'll say. But it's even these great brands that we're all familiar with, and we think of being associated with specific kinds of solutions early on. They engaged the market with one set of expectations and moved on and learned and adapted and pivoted to find a solution. So again, part of the challenge is your idea, as I like to say, is what you think doesn't matter. It's what your customer thinks, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. My journey, my version of the convoluted path here, and part of the things I got out of it, and I have the benefit of age, looking back on this longitudinally, because you don't see these things often when you're in the middle of them, is I went through this process, and the idea of being able to sign my own paycheck, to eat what I kill, as it were, or sing for your supper, the satisfaction of making your own money directly versus somebody else paying you is a really interesting dynamic. Me, coming out of the University of Michigan, PhD in artificial intelligence, software guy, learned very early on that actually I love sales, which is really incongruous, and we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. I love being in front of customers. I learned that I actually didn't like writing production software, which is what I thought I'd be doing for the rest of my life once I got out there, and in front of customers, and then all of a sudden I'm doing stuff like this, and speaking in front of large groups and trying to share our company's vision with the world. I built solutions that turned out to provide value to people, and there's nothing like walking into a shop, seeing 20 people at terminals using your software to advance their business. This stuff took me around the world literally, just in terms of personal growth. Got to live in Europe for a number of years. Learned a lot about myself, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. People started recognizing the work we do, and me being the founder CEO, got some attention and ability to do things like this, share my expertise, which is very gratifying. And then you get into a situation where you're longitudinally, again, you're providing a framework, a business you built, which is creating value for the stakeholders and the employees, ends up being a mechanism for personal growth of other people. So promoting people through my organizations and seeing them go out and have success, in some ways influenced by the opportunities they got to work at my companies. And the number of founders who have gone on to be way more successful than me is one of the most gratifying parts of my career. And our little software startup back in 1990 has generated a whole family tree of startups and on. But then you get into crazy things like an economic entity that hires 150 people. This isn't the biggest thing in the world, but it drives. All of a sudden, you're driving positive things to the economy. You look at the economics of every dollar you spend on compensation and keeping that in a geography, and how that trickles on to other parts of the local economy, the coffee shops, the restaurants, the school systems, et cetera. So you start to see something that you build on, and the set of experiences all come as a result, or all came to me as a result of raising my hand 30 years ago, saying, I want to try to create value out in the world. I'm going to take ownership of this thing, and I'm going to step up and try to make something happen. So you look at, again, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? And you have the entrepreneur from Central Casting, kind of the glad-handing extrovert who is running around and selling stuff to people. The reality is the majority of entrepreneurs don't look anything like that. In fact, the greatest entrepreneurs of our generation are arguably introverts who weren't sales oriented when they started, at least, and grew into these roles like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. And I'm not going to speak qualitatively on their personalities or anything, but it's not. It is you. It's people who look like you. It's people who have personalities like you across the spectrum who can be very, very successful as entrepreneurs. And the ones that succeed are the ones that are compelled to do it. Some people are compelled and they raise their hand and they come to us for programming, or they don't go to school and they go do something right away. That's one path. Another path is along the way you see an opportunity and you can't stop thinking about it, and you can't stop thinking about what it might do to if we take this out to market. Sometimes it's opportunity based. I'm having dinner with a woman tonight who kind of fell into a family business and never thought she would be running a substantial organization, and it turns out it's really good at it. And so there's a lot of paths to get there, and I would challenge you not to think, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm not that kind of person that wants to get out there. There are introverts and extroverts and everything in between that figure out how to do this and get a lot out of it personally. So this leads into, how do we create value? How do we succeed as entrepreneurs? Now that we've raised our hand, we've decided this is something we're interested in, we've found an opportunity, we found something that is really compelling and we can't stop thinking about it. I'm going to give you all of your tuition money back with a 6-step process, okay? So first of all, and probably the hardest part and the most important part, is to be honest with yourself. You need to understand who you are and who you aren't. You understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. You understand who you need to surround yourself with to be successful. I mentioned earlier is I really, really love sales. I'm an introvert, believe it or not, and I don't like, in general, talking to large groups of people, except situations like this where I have a very clear role. But selling to large groups of people is not my jam. Going into a conference room with 15 people and pitching, some people are amazing at that. I'm not. I'd rather get a one-on-one meeting with somebody and go in detail, and I'm much more effective in that kind of environment. So for me to be successful, I have to be in an environment where I can create those situations where I can shine and be successful. So a big part of that is recruiting people around me who can work in those bigger environments to get to that closing meeting with the VP of production or whatever, so I can do what I do. And so knowing yourself and being very clear-minded and honest with yourself about where you are and what you're best at and how you can best leverage your skills and what you don't have, right? So number one, understand who you are. Number two, you don't get there without mentors around you. As longitudinal studies, you look at, I had wonderful pleasure, again, in this job with this great university and our wonderful alumni base. Met with a gentleman out in Palo Alto who was one of Steve Jobs' early mentors. And you read his biography, or Steve Jobs' biography, and you learn about what he's done. You understand the network of people he built around himself to be successful. It's lonely at the top. It's lonely getting the door slammed in your face over and over again as you're trying to raise money or trying to sell your first product. You need people besides yourself who are willing to invest in you and provide expertise and share their knowledge to help you succeed. So know yourself, surround yourself with mentors. We'll talk about how you get to mentors later on. Third thing, and this is really hard for you guys to do, you have succeeded at everything you've done to get into this university, right? I mean, there's this ongoing competition of grades and test scores and essays and sports championships and nonprofits you founded and all this stuff you had to do to create this wonderful resume to get an opportunity to come here, which is fantastic. Good on you. Reality is you're going to have to learn how to fail and learn from failing. And that second part is what it's really about. Is failure is the most effective teacher in the world. Getting continual positive feedback is great and it feels very satisfying. But if you're not hearing the word no, or you're not hearing the word, no, you didn't do that, or you're not hearing the words, I don't want that, you're never going to grow and understand what you need to know. I had a VP of sales in my company I ran for 5 years in the early 2000s who I remember distinctly walking into a meeting. We were meeting with the executives of DuPont out in, where's their headquarters? Anyway, out east. And he's like, are you ready for the meeting? I'm like, yeah, of course I'm ready for the meeting. I got everything ready. And I just, I want to come out of this meeting with a yes. I want to hear yes. And he's like, Kurt, we need to hear no. And I'm like, Jack, we're here to close the deal. And it's a provocative statement, but if you don't hear no, you don't understand what you have. If you don't get to the point where the customer says, no, I'm not going to pay for that, you don't know whether you've left money on the table or not. If you don't get to the point saying, no, I don't need that functionality, you don't know the scope of your product. If you don't know, if you know we can't use that in that aspect of our business, you don't know how to position yourselves. And as a high achiever, you guys going out there, the way you learn from markets is, in a lot of ways, learning what you don't have and being comfortable with that and losing along the way. This turnaround I did starting in 2015, 2014, we took it from about 3 million to 15 million in revenue and reset the team, which wasn't a lot of fun, but took it from about 25 employees to 125 employees and ultimately lots of good success. About halfway through that exercise, we closed the biggest deal the company had ever closed by far. $2 million deal. It ended up being 30% of our revenue at that point. Everybody's excited. This is amazing. We need more deals like this. Our executive team, our board is like, we're doubling down on everybody who looks like that company we just sold that $2 million deal to. We reset the sales organization and with an intent of selling into that market. 6 months later, we had this much new revenue and had to take a hard look at ourselves saying, what signals did we miss from the market? And ended up laying off that sales team, which was no fun. But along the way, found another little idea that turned into be the growth engine of the company. And so had we not put ourselves out there and run those experiments and been okay with the idea that things might fail, we never would have got to the point that actually created success. And so, I was on the phone this morning with the CEO I was mentioning. He runs a labor management software company, and they missed their number in the first quarter. A little bit, not a lot. And he has an all-hands meeting on Monday to explain to his team, we missed our numbers, and that's not something you want to hear when you're in a high growth company that just got a massive venture investment at the end of the year. And I told him, the message is, first of all, there's a lot of variability in the early stage, and there's rationalizations for why you might miss your number. But the only thing that matters is not that you missed your number, that you learned from it. And what did you learn from this exercise of forecasting one thing but delivering another along the way that you missed? What metrics did you miss? Are you looking at the wrong leading indicators in your sales funnel? Are you missing functionality that didn't allow you to close business, et cetera? And so there's nothing wrong with failing except as long as you learn. And this is, I learned more from the first company I shut down than I learned from all the other companies along the way. The Number 4, you have to learn to live with this duality of you have the absolute conviction that your ideas and your product is going to change the world, and at the same time, you know not what you think means nothing. It's all what the customer thinks, and you need to have that, be able to embrace the fact that you aren't the smartest person in the room always, and even if you are the smartest person in the room, it's the person that writes the check or the user or the investor that believes in the solution, and understanding how you map to what other people think and projecting, again, having the humility to understand that your understanding of the market might not be perfect, and goes back to all those pivots we talked about, is you have to really embrace that you're wrong. Hopefully you're not super wrong, but you need to adjust as you go along. Most important rule maybe is after understanding yourselves is to, you have to be lucky. And how can this is silly, luck is something that happens randomly, right? And I call this embracing the wisdom of the Lees. So we have Stan Lee from Marvel fame, famous for saying, the greatest superhero power is luck. And in their Marvel universe, I think there's a couple of superheroes that have that power. And fortunately, we have the second Lee, Bruce Lee, who says you make your luck. And how do you make your luck? You make your luck by relentlessly pursuing value for your customers and positioning yourself, putting yourself out there so good things can happen. And we sold my first company, like I said, for $35 million. And that happened because of something else that had happened in the market that we had no control over. But after that happened, all of a sudden we were the darling that everybody was chasing about, right? So we weren't chasing an exit. We weren't positioning for this kind of success, but we had created a tremendous amount of value for a lot of people. And this ended up being a era of consolidation in the mechanical CAD market, and we were positioned ourselves so that great things can happen. So we, through effort and grit and relentless pursuit of value for our customers, we were able to succeed. Last one is anchoring yourself to culture and stage. One of the things I see often in early stage companies is they focus on problems they don't have to solve yet. And so, what stage of company are you at? Are you at proof of concept for your product? Are you at proof of revenue on the sales side? Are you proof of scale once you've figured out your sales model? A lot of companies invest in sales organizations before they understand who they're targeting and how they're targeting. A lot of organizations grow their product development team or R&D team or production team before they need to scale. And so, where are you and what do you need to accomplish? Stage of the company. Second thing is the culture, and ultimately that's the only thing you control in this complex calculus is who you hire and how you hold each other accountable. And if you come back to that relentlessly and steward your culture, then you're going to maximize your likelihood of success. People working together to do great things, that's how these things ultimately work. And that only happens if you hold each other accountable to the ideals you decide on as a group to get to the end point. So yes, this isn't exactly a process, isn't one after the other. It's really things you have to juggle constantly throughout the process, and they cycle through, and things change, and things ebb and flow, and you learn new things, and you have to come back and look in the mirror again and be honest with yourself, or you have to expand your scope of understanding of the markets you're selling into. But these are the 6 things that you have to deal with, and as Evil Kermit says, of course it's not guaranteed. There's nothing in life that's guaranteed, but there is absolutely best practice. And if you're not going to go create the value in the world, who is? And you're sitting here, these are your talents and your peers' talents. We need you to get out there and make the world a better place. So if you're starting your own company, it's amazing. If you're going to go work at General Motors or GE or Amazon, you can take this mindset in all of those contexts and create tremendous value for folks. And so we want to think of this, and at the end of it all, there is cake, and cake is awesome. So.
Thank you, Kurt. One of the things that I want to try to pull apart from that conversation is you talked about the notion of finding great mentors. Tell them how. And not only how, but what they need to be looking for as core components of a mentor or mentor relationship.
That's a great question. And I look at, in my career, I had folks, a lot of wonderful people who agreed to spend time with me, certainly early on, and really, shaped the way I looked at the companies I was growing. And it's networking, which is, we learned from Jules last week, talked about, how we engage with the people around us. And the reality is people are really willing to help if you ask, generally. People are, I look through the connections I have and the relationships I have and to find people who had expertise and experience, in the areas that was, that I was lacking in a lot of ways, and just, engaging them honestly and with a real desire to learn from them. It's just, again, it's amazing how open people are to helping when people ask them. It can be a great experience. The maize and blue ecosystem that you'll see once you get out of this place. There's a lot of really talented people all around the world that are eager to help our new grads and help them with their careers. And there's a lot of different places to look, including with our organization. We have wonderful ambassadors in pretty much every ecosystem around the world, and people we can connect you with who can help you take that next step.
So outside of someone's ability to help in a niche area or in a network, what's a core component of a mentor relationship that you've either experienced in from a mentor point of view or from a mentee perspective?
Yeah, I think it's, you're looking for somebody who has that experience and that perspective and the ability to kind of pull you out of the day-to-day to look at the big picture. You talk about working on the business versus working in the business, again, in the context of, a startup. And it's, having somebody that can pull you out and provide credible feedback. And it's, there's, again, it starts with understanding who you are and what are the skills you're missing and what you're going to need to complement your set of experiences and expertise. And
it's a little bit of a sidestep, but as I've watched you and observed you mentoring students and startup teams coming through, having been somebody who studied and learned about AI in the early 90s and has been around for the multiple waves that have come through, I couldn't let you off stage without having you break down for them what is the 1-minute summary of the state of AI today. What's bullshit? What's real? Tell them, give them the truth.
Yeah, so this is the third wave of AI. Many of you weren't born then, but there's been two prior periods of great excitement around AI, and like a lot of markets, things ebb and flow, and a lot of technologies ebb and flow, and you inevitably, on the other side of these hype cycles, you see a trough of disillusionment associated with those, which is often where the opportunities are, because the market overcompensates, and you can, and if you invest in bringing stuff to market in the trough of disillusionment, you can be very successful. I think that we're in a world now where everything that can be digitized can be analyzed with these kinds of models, and we are in, there's a tremendous amount of hype, and the reality in a lot of areas is yet to be proven out. In the general application of these foundational models to specific problems, we'll see a lot more detail over the next year, probably, of what's going to actually really work in a credible way beyond a chatbot, which is really interesting to interact with, and a co-pilot that can write some text for you that you'll edit down, but to get to solutions where you can push a button and trust the output to be correct and validated and referenceable. We're a little bit a ways from that. But in smaller, more bounded applications like AlphaFold from Google is a much smaller domain. The number of compounds on the periodic table, they use that same technology to predict how proteins could fold, which revolutionized our understanding of medicine in a lot of ways. And so there are things like that where you look at very narrow domains. These tools will do crazy things. You look at genetics as another opportunity where the alphabet is 4 letters, right? And so you look at the number of combinations from that, and the ability of these tools to parse all of the information there is going to be transformational.
You're very humble. You won't say this, but if you want to learn more about AI, he's actually teaching a short course right now for CFE. You can find it on the website. I'll send out info afterward. Part of that notion of you being humble, and we have just a minute left here to go, one of the superpowers I've observed that you have that is not that common, and I'm curious to hear how you otherwise would wield it and advise them to use it if they share it, is your discretion. You're very intentional, and you're very discreet in a very methodical way when you engage with people, when you mentor, when you help, and when you lead. How did you develop that strength, and what do they need to know about incorporating it into their own way of operating?
I have a smart-ass response to that.
That's okay, give it that way.
No, it's. I think ultimately, I believe in people, and I believe in their ability to do the right thing for the most part. And as a manager and a leader, it is my job to break down barriers and get out of their way. And I want people to be able to use their skills and grow. And I love, I've talked about this a lot with teams over time, is my preference is to put the ball out in front of the organization and see who gets to the ball first and how they can grow and add to their skill set to get there. And I think me being micromanaging that process is not a way to get there. There's always times where one as a leader or manager needs to step in and define a process, but largely I believe in people, and I believe you give them the right guidelines, they're going to do great things. And again, engaging the world with a growth mindset, I believe and I advocate for my team members and teammates to engage that way, and that has worked out well.
Thanks for coming to share some of those guidelines today with everybody. Have a great weekend. Make sure you turn in that paper on your way out, okay? Your name on there as well. Thank you.
Sorry.